OK, let's kick off this afternoon with the big story of the day, the one we're all talking about, all our newspapers, the border crisis in the Channel. Some Tory backbenchers have accused the Home Office of incompetence after 39 asylum seekers who boarded the Bibi Stockholm were transferred to alternative accommodation on Friday after traces of Legionella bacteria were found in the onboard water system. Despite this, there are plans to extend the government's fleet of barges. The news comes as 6 people died and more than 50 were rescued from a capsized boat crossing the Channel in the early hours of Saturday morning. So, has the government lost control, or are they just fresh out of ideas? Does anyone have the answers? So, let's find out what answers my panel will come up with. Again, it is former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. OK, so the front page of the papers have the awful, tragic story, gentlemen, of what happened in the Channel and the fact that, 6 people lost their lives, 50 people were saved, but there are still some missing. I mean, presumably, after this length of time, it's not going to be good news. And there were children on this boat as well. So to wake up to some of the suggestions that the government are coming up with about how to tackle this crisis, including more barges, it's just so frustrating. And when you think people are risking their lives, what is the answer to this question? We keep debating. Meanwhile, people keep dying and people still keep making money out of these poor souls. Nigel, I'm going to come to you first. What do you make of this? It's just...
Well, I mean, the first thing there, you're linking it with the barges there. The first thing there is that the biggest deterrent you'd think for crossing the Channel is the fact you could be killed in it. And what was astonishing yesterday after this tragedy was another 500 people then crossed over. So it's hard to see that barges or going to Rwanda or any of those gimmicks that the government keep coming up with will actually be a deterrent. These people are determined to get here.
Well, this is the one story I was shocked by today. I mean, obviously, the awful tragedy was shocking enough. But then for the Sunday Telegraph to carry a story that the government are suggesting more barges to solve this problem.
Well, I mean, it won't. I mean, the point of the barges is to cut down on the £6 million a day cost of hotels for migrants. Yes, we must cut down on the cost. Barges are not the right way to do it. What the government needs to do is to cut the 173,000 backlog, which is up from 19,000 in 2010, for instance. Cut the backlog by employing more caseworkers, as Rishi Sunak promised. He said we should have 2,500. We haven't. If you cut the backlog, you reduce the hotel bill.
Ben, that's not going to happen overnight, though, is it? We still have 500 people a day, I mean 750 the other day, crossing the Channel.
That's 1.5 barges in one day.
Exactly. So we're going to need about 200, I think, by about the end of next month.
The barges are a red herring. What we need to look at is at the root of the problem here. And the root of the problem is obviously France. Because they're coming... France has illegal migration of about 180,000 people a year, in significant part, because the EU operates an open border Schengen zone. So once people enter the European Union in Italy or Greece, they can come straight into France. That's a significant part of the problem.
This is the France we paid 500 million
So we paid
to.
50 million quid 3 years ago, 55 million quid 2 years ago, 63 million quid last year, and now we've agreed to pay £500 million. And the more people they send over, the more money we pay them. Actually, what we've done is create the reinforcement of bad behaviour. They know that if this problem accelerates, not only do they get rid of more people to the United Kingdom, but actually we'll end up paying them even more. But yesterday's...
What are they doing with the money, Ben?
Well, I mean, no doubt it's going in the back pockets of French government somewhere. I'm not suggesting there's any impropriety going on, but it's certainly leaving our taxpayers' pockets and not delivering the effect that we wish of it. But, yesterday, as shocking as it was, what it revealed was that the entire process of crossing the channel is a pantomime. And I say it's a pantomime because up and down the French beach go French police officers, occasionally slashing a dinghy. But the minute the dinghy gets into the water, it's got French naval escort. These dinghies, carrying 70 people, capsized in the presence of French naval boats. And it was because they were in proximity to these boats that actually the vast majority of them got rescued. And the other thing that from which you can only conclude it's a pantomime is that RNLI crossed over into French waters, British ships crossed over into French waters, helped rescue these people, and then brought them back to the United Kingdom. They should have been taken back to France. They
Hang
were
on,
in
this is a
French.
rescue attempt.
They were in French waters, 5 miles off the French coast. It was much quicker to deposit them back in France.
Provided there was the medical care at the other end to actually deal with them, because most of them went back to France. So what you had there was a rescue operation in cooperation with British and French, RNLI doing it, who are the experts at rescue. They argue that the best way of actually getting medical help to those people was to speed them straight back to Britain.
The whole thing is a pantomime. If they really wanted to stop the boats, what we would have seen yesterday is these people being taken back to France. The notion that they can't get adequate medical help in France and we can somehow deliver it seamlessly when they land it over just doesn't make any sense.
With a pretty major disaster. We weren't just talking about 6 people who drowned.
5 miles off the French coast, therefore 20 miles
we were
off
talking about a boat containing around 70 people. So here's this boat capsizing. The French and the British do what they're meant to do. They get together to sort out a rescue operation. The majority of those people end up going back to France, as Ben would like.
No, they didn't. The majority came to the United Kingdom.
No, the majority went to France.
We can't rewrite what happened yesterday, Nigel.
No, but the majority ended up in France.
It is a pantomime.
But the idea that in the middle of a sea rescue, you actually start thinking about the diplomatic niceties of where people are actually going.
No.
What you do is you go out there and you save lives.
You go out there and you save lives and you take them back to the nearest point of land that you can. And they came to the United Kingdom. And that's why it's a pantomime. And we have no form of deterrence in the United Kingdom. There is no deterrence. We spend around £50,000 a year per migrant. The French spend about £5,000 a year. And if you need one statistic to evidence why they're incentivized to make that journey across the Channel, it's the fact that they're 10 times better off in the UK than they are in France.
Well, in France they will get processed in half the time.
They're in France.
It's taking 15.5 months to even process them here. Hence again the cost of the hotel bill.
There is only one solution. There is only one solution to this problem, and that is to actually physically stop the boats. We have to have the equivalent of the Australian Operation Sovereign Borders that they had in 2013, which worked extremely well. And when people recognised that they could not make it across into Australia, the boats stopped.
The Australian system was completely different from the one we're facing here. You were talking about 150 miles between Indonesia and Australia.
It makes no difference.
Well, of course it makes a difference.
It makes absolutely no difference.
The boats are bigger, so the boats are more seaworthy, and they can be turned round by the Australian Navy. You cannot turn round a little dinghy with a big destroyer.
That is utter nonsense. You develop a specific, well-trained, bespoke border force that is trained to deliver that result.
And how does that happen? Tell me how.
I don't need to tell you how it would happen.
Because it can't happen. These are dinghies that are waterlogged and sinking.
You disable the motor, and you put someone on the boat and you take them back to France.
Right. So you would take them back to France from British waters?
Absolutely.
OK. So when the French say to us, well, hang on a sec, we've got our own problems, as you've pointed out, with asylum seekers. They have many more asylum seekers than we do. The last thing they want is to attract more by getting them across. But they'll be saying, hey, they don't come to Calais to look around and enjoy the sights. They come to Calais to get to Britain. What the French can do is say, well, we'll help you then. We'll deposit the ones who want to come to Britain on the British coast. So how would you like that?
So what you are saying, which I hope you're saying, is that paying money to the French is a complete waste of time. Because on that, we will at least agree. The French are part of the problem. And as long as our government keeps thinking that France is a potential solution to this problem, there is no hope of us getting ahead of it. We have to recognise France is part of the problem. These people are going to cross the channel with the help of the French. We need to take unilateral, determined British action. And that is the only way. We have a right, under international law, to protect our borders.
Absolutely.
And we are not protecting our borders.
I don't disagree with you there.
But speeding up asylum applications is going to stop it.
But the asylum seekers who are coming to Britain are not actually France's problem. That is why we're paying...
They are France's problem.
They're not. They're just passing through France.
Oh, come on.
As they pass through a load of other countries on the way to getting there.
This is an absolutely nonsensical argument.
If we're talking about Europe as a whole, the EU don't have a problem with Greece operating that pushback where they push migrants trying to get across the Mediterranean into Turkish waters, but they do have a problem with what we're doing. So I'm just wondering, is it in the EU's interest to stop migrants getting into the EU countries, but they're more than happy to see them come across from the EU countries into Britain?
Well, I think they're not happy because that attracts them to come through Europe. So the problem is a Europe-wide problem. It's a global problem. So the last thing that France wants is for a load of migrants to pass through their country because they want to come to Britain.
If we pushed back the boats, the French closed their borders, the Italians closed their borders, the Italian government and the Greek government...
How do you push back the boats? We're back to the same problem
Can
again.
I just finish? I haven't finished. If the Italian government developed a backbone, the Greek government developed a backbone, they actually had some proper pushback procedures of their own, this problem would stop.
Gentlemen, there, on that word stop, I have to stop you for now. Wow, it's certainly getting hot.
Thank you for refereeing.
It's certainly getting hot in here, isn't it?